We have a really great meeting today. We are going to be hearing from Christine White from Georgia, who's going to talk to us about why we are raising money for Georgia for the runoff, even though Reverend Warnock's campaign probably is, gathering millions of dollars. There is still work to be done in Georgia, and Christine White is going to be telling us what her group of grassroots groups does and how our money will be used, and we will hear from her shortly. We're also going to, of course, hear from Jim Shelton. He'll do a little bit of analysis about what happened and where we are and his thoughts about that.
So I'm about to turn this over to Christine White, but I'm just going to show one slide about for emphasis on the Georgia Alliance for Progress and their support for Reverend Warnock. One is that, of course, there are compelling reasons to elect him. We all know you wouldn't be on this call if you didn't know this. But just to lay it out a little better, we do need a better Dem majority to kind of help finesse Kristen Sinema and Manchin. And we need to be better prepared for 2024. We got a tough election in 2024, especially for Senate. And, Bernie Sanders might die and the governor of Vermont could appoint a Republican. So there's plenty of reason to want this to pass, mostly because he's a great, fine senator. So the reason we like the Georgia Alliance for Progress is we really think that there's already a strong set of grassroots groups. And rather than trying to pick out some, we really think they're in the best position to allocate funds to have the best impact among those C4 organizations and for coordination among them, which is another role that they play. And also, they're emphasizing canvassing, they're emphasizing turnout, which I think is strategically very strong. And again, in terms of trying to help persuade you to help us with money, just time is of the essence, as they say in contracts. In some counties, early voting actually starts in 13 days. So we need to kind of keep things going, get things going. They need the support now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christine and stop sharing. Over to you, Christine.
Hello. I'm going to just take a minute to appreciate all of you while our development director, Anna Beck, has an opportunity to switch slides and get us up and going. But I truly want to say that with my whole heart, I am so thankful and grateful for y'all. Everything that I've heard on this call since I've been on a few minutes before 4 has just lifted my spirits. You all don't know the type of fight we end up fighting, even among our allies and folks who say that they want the same thing. But as you know, all political donors and investors and theorists and strategists do not support or appreciate grassroots organizing, trusted messengers, canvassing, the way that I have heard you all lift it up and really give it its due respect. A lot of the reason that folks deny the impact of trusted messengers is just because they're not one. They don't know how to be a trusted messenger. And so they lean on what they know, which we can't blame them for. But it has just been so inspiring and so heartwarming to hear your enthusiasm. And I'm just grateful and thankful that you're here. I apologize, I didn't change the date. I've been doing these briefings probably a couple a day. I didn't do any yesterday. I took a break Saturday, but we've been doing a few of these every day. And so I'm just thankful that you guys are as enthused as we are for the future of Georgia and for the future of the South, really. What we are doing in Georgia is laying the foundation for democracy that really builds upon a multiracial framework and deconstructs the very in-depth and ingrained effects of white supremacy, of enslavement, of just racial otherness that controls what we see and all of the efforts, really. in the South. And so we are not just hopeful for Georgia and excited about the success that we have, but we are hopeful and excited about what we are going to see when thousands and thousands of progressive voters who have heretofore not ever believed that their voice could make a difference are empowered to join our democracy and be fully fledged and full investors with their whole body and their hearts in the American process. So I'll just start with our first slide. I do need to say a quick disclaimer because that's just the nature of this work. Georgia Alliance, we are the C3, C4, and PAC fundraising entity for the progressive movement in the state. And so if you are here representing a C3, just take what information you can and apply it as it is legally appropriate. And if you are, there will be information shared that is C4 appropriate. And so you can stay on the call in your personal capacity. If you are from the media, we ask that you don't have your media hat on during this conversation, and that if you are here for the purposes of distributing this information as the media, that you will log off. And we'll just also ask that you don't share any of this information on social media. My colleague Anna will be putting our full plan. It's not our full plan. Our full plan is like almost hundreds of spreadsheets and all manner of things, but our abbreviated plan, our brief, in the chat so that you guys can see it and you can see all of our giving information. Next slide, please. And also just so good to see so many faces. It seems like I've seen some of you before. I don't know why, I don't know where. Mary, you look so familiar. We've had a conversation before, I feel. Anyway, Georgia Alliance we are scheduling update calls for all of our donors. And those calls will happen 10 o'clock every Monday. And so you will receive a calendar invite. We hope that you will share it with folks who are sincerely intentional about being donors. This is not sort of a strategy session. We don't have time for community strategy sessions. We've been building our strategy for the past 6 months. So we will ask that if you are interested in sharing this with someone who wants to be a donor and wants to support the strategy that is already in place, that you will share that information. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I am Christine White of Georgia Alliance for Progress. The entities that I represent is a C3, a C4, and 2 PACs. We are a coalition, and you can see these lines, as our development director, Anna Beck, likes to say. These lines exist for the purpose of the pictures, but the way that we operate as a community, as an infrastructure, there are no lines. Georgia Alliance incubated and started what's now called America Votes Georgia, also Progress Georgia, and Represent Georgia. Pro Georgia actually was the first time, or I don't want to say the first time because coalition is older than all of us, but it was the first organized effort to pull donors and organizers together. And so that is run by Tamika Atkins. And I just wanted to show you that there are real people behind these incredible entities, these engines of democracy. Next. And so these are the entities, the coalition tables. These coalition tables, we are, I just sort of filled in the information for you, but we support over 120 grassroots and national organizations that have permanent, what am I trying to say, that are permanently rooted in the state. So there are some organizations like the Sierra Club that are part of our coalition. And then there are organizations that you may not have heard of. Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda is one of them. So organizations that are what we would traditionally consider to be grassroots, but also much larger organizations that operate as grassroots. And that's really the point. We want organizations to operate as community advocates, not just to be in community, trying to tell communities what to do, but servicing communities and identifying for communities what makes those communities most powerful, and then bringing that information back to us so we can raise the funds to do that work. Next slide, please. And so this is just a smattering of unfortunately, we don't have everybody's slides. We're working on getting a slide with everybody on there. There's almost too many to really represent in this way, but I just wanted to show you this is what coalition looks like. Our coalition partners meet as a full group once a month, and then they meet in work groups based on what they're working on. So criminal justice work group based mostly around democracy, but criminal justice and democracy, climate justice and democracy, reproductive rights and democracy. They also have work groups. And so these folks are working together. They know each other. We're all on Slack channels and all manner of communication that really keep us energized, but we are like a big family in and of itself. And so the plan that you will see is the plan that has been developed in partnership with this community. Next slide, please. We have 26 partners, and I'm going to now get into the very specific runoff election. We have 26 partners that have raised their hand to knock doors. The budget that you will see in our chat and that you will see at the end of this presentation anticipates that we will be able to fund all of these organizations who want to knock doors. Of course, if we don't come up with all of the funding, all of these organizations may not get funding, or they'll get a very small portion of it. But our idea is that, and our theory of change really is that every organization plays a different role in our community, and all of those communities must be represented in order for us to win. Next slide, please. Not all of our partners are efficient at knocking doors. Some of them are better at phone banking. Some of them are better at creating incredible energy in the streets in their communities. Some of them are doing digital outreach. Some of them are doing relational outreach. So this is all the other mobilizing that will be done. And I just wanted to give you an idea of how many groups we're supporting to do this type of work. We have immigrant groups. We have racial justice groups. We have reproductive rights groups. We have regional organizations. So it's a huge breadth and width, but I will tell you that the folks in these groups, the folks that are really committed and participate regularly in our coalition, are very close, and they, for lack of a better word, ride for each other on each other's issues. So just because you're with an environmental group doesn't mean that when you show up at the legislature, or that when you're out knocking doors, you're only talking about the environment. Because we know that people are holistic, and there are very few one issue people. Next slide. So our timeline, if you have been paying attention to what the Georgia legislature has really made as their best effort to keep us from having the same type of victory that we had in 2021 and the runoff, they have truncated the opportunity that we have to really prepare for this runoff. They in 2021, we had 2 months, I believe, from November until beginning of January. Now we only have November to December. And so we have sort of hit the ground running. We reached into our operations budgets for next year and just started funding groups, because we knew that, number one, the money was going to come, because there are lots of folks all around the country really paying attention to this race. It's important to the entire country. And in addition to that, our organizations could not wait. They could not wait for the funding to be transferred. And there was a bank holiday on Friday. And so we wanted to make sure that groups could stay up. Next slide, please. Our general theory of change, our strategic imperative around this election has not changed. It is always about expanding the electorate. There are, we only show up in about 50% of our eligible voters, only 50% of them show up. Our key goal as a coalition is to increase that percentage of participation. We want to make sure that everyone feels empowered to be a part of our democracy. We have to improve on the Black men and Black women, but improve on Black men's share with Black women. We have to improve on AAPI and Latinx turnout. We have to increase the spread out the vote, which is early voting. In this case, we're going to be following up absentee voting for the folks who absolutely have to absentee vote. We'll be chasing those ballots to make sure they get in. And then, of course, there are regional spaces that need really specific attention, like the Black Belt and like North Metro cities. And we have to stay competitive on paid media. Next slide, please. So the assumption is that this is basically a turnout election, and we've known this. It was the same case in 2021. We know who voted, even if we don't know exactly, we don't have a complete breakdown, but we have a sense of who's voted. And so we're going to get all of those folks. We have built our universe around the people who voted, and we're getting all of them out to vote again. I just want to mention that voting is a muscle. And so when you exercise it, you become stronger. And so we want to make sure that we are retouching every person we touched in the general election, but also all the people we touched in 2020 and 2021. Next slide. These are, some of the detail that I think you all would be really interested in. State phones and texts to targeted voters. A lot of that is going to be based on density and our ability to raise funds to knock doors. The more that we're able to knock doors, we will also, of course, do phones, but in some places, knocking doors is just not feasible. So we have to lean more on phones, text, and paid comms. We are, of course, an education focused organization. We've been spending C4 and PAC dollars to educate about the candidate. And then we are also just educating folks about what a runoff is. A lot of people don't even know. And this runoff idea is, of course, the remnants of Jim Crow. And so it's not something that happens all over the country, but Georgia has held on to this idea that if you don't get 50% plus one, that there should be a runoff. And so lots of our voters, who, especially the ones who are new to Georgia, don't even understand the concept of runoff. And so we have a lot of education to do there. Next slide, please. It just gives you a sense of who our general election universe was. And it's very similar. The folks who we knocked 3 million doors in the general election. We have made that universe a little bit smaller. And the universe is not just, we don't knock the, necessarily the doors of 4 million people, but it's everybody gets a touch based on what is most feasible and what our partners can do. So that 60% of the Democratic electorate in Georgia is African American. White folks are holding at about 25%. They've been there 25, 26% for the past few decades. The Asian American and Hispanic voters, we've seen huge growth in those areas over the past 2 years. And so we're going to continue to stoke that. But what we see is that they don't necessarily, although they've grown demographically, they haven't necessarily grown as a part of the Democratic electorate. And so we're trying to increase those numbers. Next. And so this is our runoff universe. As you see, it's a little bit smaller than our general election universe. And we will be knocking 2.14 million doors. And we will be giving, depending on the treatment, depending on who the voter is, we will be knocking some doors more than once. Does that make sense? So you will see here that our canvas universe is larger, but this is the number of doors is larger, but this is the universe. Next slide. So our canvas, we hope to knock 4 million doors. I mean, we really need to do 4 million knocks to stay competitive and to get out the folks who we know are the folks who are going to vote with us. We have about a 20, so more recently, it's generally a 20% contact rate. In the last election, in general election, it's been up to about 27%, which is good because I think it's partially because folks are still home from COVID. People have flexible work plans. And so we're reaching far more people than we've reached in the past. Our phone universe is 3.2 million and our mail universe is 2 million. But you see that the total mail pieces is much larger than the universe. We are also taking into consideration, and this is a plan that was not just built with our organizations, but also built with SMP, Senate Majority PAC, and some of the quasi-political organizations that can work on this side. So we build a strategy for what we know has to happen for us to win, and then we identify what part of it can our coalition do. Next slide. So just a little bit more detail into our canvas plan. We started canvassing the Thursday after elections. We got folks back up. We gave them Wednesday off and they're back this weekend knocking doors. And so we will ramp. There are a couple of organizations that have the ability to ramp really quickly. And then there are a few organizations that we just had to make sure they had the funding to hold what they've been doing through the general election. And of course, we were anticipating this. And so organizations were preparing to hold, and that's why we were able to get lit printed up even before we knew that we would have an election. We had just C3 lit printed up that said what the date of the election was, because we didn't know if it was going to be Stacey Abrams and Reverend Warnock, or if it was just going to be Reverend Warnock. But we had that available to partners, and they came and picked it up on Wednesday, and they were out knocking doors on Thursday. Next slide. And this is just gives you a really good sense of what the other tactics are. It's not just Canvas, as I said. We are going to be focusing in digital and on radio. We're going to be focusing on where we have to print materials and mail materials. And then there's just the community engagement, the Souls to the Polls, the Party at the Polls, the sound and video trucks, all of that work, which is just so important to build knowledge of the election and also be a reminder. We can't let anybody forget that there's election, and we really need to push people to the polls during early vote. I meant to say this earlier, but early vote is going to start as early, and this depends on the county, it's up to every county, as early as the 26th, but they have to have early vote by at least the 28th. Next slide. Oh, it's two, I think I did that twice. Sorry, guys. Next slide. I forgot to delete. This is our timeline. I'll just give you a sense, I'll give you a moment to take that in. As you see, we've been up Canvas since the 9th. And let's see what else. We've been texting, and community engagement doesn't stop. Paid media has not stopped. Paid media went up, and that's a lot of that is S&P. They have really deep pockets, and so they are the ones who are footing the media bill. We are not. We do not put anything on TV, and we actually don't do as huge radio buys. We focus on local community-owned radio. Next slide. I think we just have this slide. Oh no, this is our immediate needs slides. I'm sorry. So, as you know, we don't have a lot of time. We are, as I mentioned, we've sort of fronted, and America Votes National has also fronted a good portion of our budget, but we need funding. It's just there's no other way to put it. I am so thrilled about the news that we have 50% of the Senate, but we have some really incredible folks that don't always vote with us and don't share our values, representing the Democratic Party in the Senate. And we know that we just cannot allow Herschel Walker to represent the United States of America, as you know. And so this is a real fight. I think from the perspective of a Southerner, I'm not surprised at all that it was so close. Lots of folks, my father is from Brooklyn, but lives in California, and just was blown away that the race was so close. But we know that when we put emphasis in face-to-face communications, we win. And so the more people that we can reach out to in the community with trusted messengers, with folks that they're familiar with, through folks they're familiar with, the better chance we have. But all of that costs money, and canvassing is hard. When all of our canvassers are paid. We don't have any programs. There will be programs for volunteers, but what we are focusing on is paid, experienced canvassers who understand those communities, who are native to those communities, and understand the needs of the people that they're talking to. And so this is our most immediate slide. Next slide. Our most immediate budget. This is our overall budget. And so, like I mentioned, there's a good amount of support from folks all over the country. This seems very daunting. The actual entire budget for what has to happen in Georgia is $57 million. This is the piece that Georgia Alliance and our partners have broken off and said, we're going to handle this piece. And so it is incumbent, it is important for folks like you, the folks who are supporting democracy in your states, that you are also see the opportunity to support us here in Georgia. And we're just thankful for you. I will pause now and I'm sure that there are some questions in the chat. If you I don't know who wants to run the questions, but I'm open to that. We can also go back to any slide that you may want to look at a little bit more.
Okay, thanks again, Christine. We appreciate your taking this time, and that was a very helpful PowerPoint. It gave us a lot of information. A lot of people are donating. We're having problems with communication in the chat, but I'm seeing a lot of people saying that they are donating, so that is fantastic.